Hello and welcome to this edition of DeFacto Review, a weekly roundup of the biggest stories coming out of Mongolia this week. Here with us tonight is our host, Jargal DeFacto, and I'm Terrence Edwards. We're broadcasting on Facebook at VTelevision. Tweet us your views on Twitter with the hashtag DeFacto. Coming up on the program. Parliament has taken the 49% shareholding in the Eranet mine that was quietly purchased by a little-known copper company last July. Lawmakers on Friday ruled that the shareholding in Eranet Copper purchased from Russia for $400 million by privately owned Mongolian Copper Corporation should be transferred to the state ownership. The deal, which was announced just a day before the parliamentary elections, possibly contributing to the landslide loss of the former administration run by former Prime Minister Chmed Sakenbillig, was controversial because of the secrecy surrounding it and the overwhelming presence from Trade and Development Bank and its chairman, Doljan Erdenbillig. A parliamentary probe found that in addition to the $200 million that it provided in financing, it also loaned indirectly through shell companies controlled by the bank and management controls the remainder of the sum paid. So Jargal, looking back at this deal, this goes back more than 6 months ago. Will there be any money coming back to this Mongolian Copper Corporation that made this purchase? And how is this going to affect Mongolia's largest bank, Trade and Development?
Wow. Well, once the parliament had decided that they will take the issues, take 49% to the government, to state, it opens a lot controversial issues, because now it is the transactions of purchase of certain things between two companies had happened already. Now, when they say that it is illegal, then it is a matter of invalid or disvalid the whole transactions. Then the shares should go back to the Russians. It's turned out not, because the provisions say that they don't valid all provisions of that time decisions of the government, but only one provision out of 3 or 4 provisions from the government resolutions. So it opens a bunch of questions, in particular legal issues. And as a legal entity, of course, this Mongolian company will go to arbitration, of course, where I don't know which arbitration, because now it is becoming as a dispute between Mongolian entities, Mongolian private company, Mongolian government. So it's most likely is to go to Mongolian arbitration court, which is at the Chamber of Commerce of Mongolia. So that's one issue. Second issue that attracts more attention is your second part, where this money came from. It came through shell companies, to 6 shell companies, which is organized, owned by the employees and the related people to the TDB Bank, right? Trade and Development Bank.
So it really was Trade and Development 100% behind this deal?
Yes. So this is what the Parliament Commission says, Standing Committee, Inspection Work Committee says, report says.
That's how they concluded their investigation.
But now it is to be verified, or it is to be said by the whole final words to be made by the Mongol Bank, which is looking after all commercial banks.
Yeah.
And the Mongol Bank itself also, which borrowed against its law 306 billion tugriks, or about $200 million to a company that was giving a loan to these shell companies too. So most probably it will take a long process, the first part, taking the shares by the government. Second, about this inspection of the commercial banks to be made at the two levels. One is Central Bank of Mongolia about transactions of Trade and Development Bank, and the Mongol bank transactions should be checked again by the parliament. So these are the two issues to come. Provided that these issues are solved, then now the issue comes, why this 49% to go to the Mongolian government? Mongolian government, which owns 51%, was never, ever was good management. The whole politicians who come through elections to the power, they were supplying whatever they could do to Erdenet when it was state-owned or controlled. It is now. And they were always doing insider trading with the Erdenet. So I suggest all this Erdenet should be on international stock market, should be the proper IPO by proper international reputable banks, underwriting banks should be IPO prepared for international stock market. So that's what we're expecting. Only in that cases, when the majority of shares of this copper company, when it's owned by shareholders and controlled by shareholders, then there will be a lot of wrongdoing, which was a part of a history of that Erdenet all the time. So that's what the ordinary Mongolians probably will demand from the state.
And looking at the best interests of the actual copper mine, what do you think, is it better off having some private ownership that may be more responsible with how it's run? And looking forward, do you think the government plans to hold on to this 49% ownership, or perhaps will do its own auctioning off or some kind of public offering?
49% of Erdenet alone, whatever interesting price is there, unless it goes to the international stock market, will be not interesting for future investors. Why they would invest into the state majority-owned company, just buying, all individuals will buy the maximum 49%. So for the best interest of Mongolia and best interest of Mongolian people and best interest of the company, it should be majority shares to be sold on the international stock exchange, so that the government, Mongolian government stake should be way down, so that we have better control of all resources of the company. And this company needs a lot of investment more too. They need more renovation of a lot of equipments, processing machineries, and also they need additional exploration work to increase their reserve, which estimated to be finished by 2040. So this is whole cities around that factory, and around 6,000 people work for this factory. So it's a very serious matter to start all this renovation, increasing of the reserves from now. Otherwise, the city will be, after 20-some years after, it will be another ghost city, former mining city, like we see many in the U.S. and Canada.
The declining coal towns, yes. So this was actually a big topic watched by many people today, and there was a lot of discussion among parliament members. Can you give us some of the comments made?
Well, this is truly very diversified comments. Some said it's state-owned one, we should take it, no doubt, take it off. But there are a few, majority said that, it's right that we should take this, state should own it, and they have stolen it, and we will take it back, and the majority feeling. But there were a few parliament members, like one is Mr. Inkbayar, J. Inkbayar. He said, no, it should be public company, shareholding company, shares company, as the state is never managed well, as I said earlier. So there were some rational voices as well. And the third voices were saying that, no, let's investigate first how they have raised the fund illegally. And that's the first issue to discuss. If it is illegal, then the whole next one is automatically or consequently or logically illegal. So that's the issue. So depending on which, say, criminal cases they say, will start, the fate of this internet company will depend on.
Yeah. Like you mentioned before, this is just the first decision made. There will be talks going on with the Trade and Development Management, so there will be more to report on this issue, I'm sure.
Not only report, a lot of scandals going to coming.
Moving forward, also with today's legislative agenda, the independence of the Development Bank of Mongolia is at the center of a $5 billion bailout from the IMF ahead of a $500 million debt repayment from the government by March. The Parliament on Friday passed new legislation about how the bank is managed that should meet most of the 15 conditions outlined by the International Monetary Fund for the bailout. While many fear that the IMF will demand social welfare cuts and tax hikes in return, a letter received by Parliament reveals that the International Financial Group is most interested in loosening politicians' grips from the Development Bank. So there was 15 items outlined that was received by the Standing Committee for Budget, and that was introduced by the head of that Standing Committee, Hurlbatter. What were these lines mentioning, and what was really the gist of what they're asking for?
As you have mentioned, that $580 million payment is coming, due to only a few days from now on. If Mongolia is getting IMF money, looks like there is no other channel, because with the IMF money, which they say from IMF itself is around less than $500 million package, but with this money, Japan is ready to provide more money. China, I understand, with this swap, some conditions will be changed. And first time China RMBs are now part of SDR of IMF.
Yes.
So there looks like more money comes. And yet we discuss about the money possibly coming to save this development bank. So there are two issues. Of course, IMF will demand more discipline. Without that, they cannot give that money. So whether this government will accept decreasing all the social money, it's a big political issue, because they have promised on quite contrary. They will increase, there will be more social welfare, etc. So this is the first dilemma they have. Secondly, how to deal with the development bank. Development bank needs now a law that they are discussing. But that law, what kind of law do we expect? Because originally, development bank, like any development bank in the world, it should go for mostly infrastructure, long-term projects, financing, etc. And the money, the money source money should be also of longer term, not like current one, which is 5 years or so the most, or 3 years, bonds that are guaranteed by the government. So today's dilemma is what kind of development bank we want to see. Okay, and how much it will be related to the government and its budget. Up to now, what happened was government had two avenues of spending. One is a budget, the other was this development bank money. And 54% of the loan portfolio of the development bank is to be paid by the government, because they said so they have to. And now, if further development bank goes with the government guarantee, then government should have a special fund for giving a guarantee, like any commercial bank would do to their customer. The government has to make a special fund for possible risk.
It's its own collateral.
Yes. So whether this government can afford that special fund as a collateral, so that's the issue. So government has a lot of things to solve, and it is not very easy task, and they have a big pressure along with that to pay that $580 million as soon as possible, because it is a first Mongolian government bond payment, okay, and they cannot fail it because then it's kind of a default. If default comes, the Mongolian private companies, Mongolian economies, private companies cannot receive money. Because if the state in failure, default, then how the private company can do? So many issues are connected with this payment.
So we're talking about $3 to $5 billion from the IMF. Is with Mongolia having about 2.5 billion in bonds issued, plus the additional currency bonds, yuan and the yen from past years. Is 5 billion enough, or is it a bit overkill, or will Mongolia be able to utilize this money to actually make more?
I think it's a little bit too big.
Too much.
Too much when even the government had not changed their attitude towards the basic things where the government should live by its means. How come it's like an ordinary family living, beyond their earnings? They spend too much. So I think without changing that attitude, the government does not deserve to receive more money. And that will be more danger for the economy, because now they will spend again more, instead of thinking to create the conditions for competition, fair competition, which only can increase the productivity. With a higher productivity and efficiency, we will have more products going not only to domestic market, but also international market. So whether we are doing enough for that increasing competitiveness of the Mongolian economy or not, it's a completely separate issue, but the government is not doing enough for that, not doing a lot of things in this regard.
So we see kind of a parallel between the development bank and Aranet, where people say government control has hurt the actual operations, how these companies can be profitable or financially wise in how they run things. So do you think this independence of management, this freedom from the politicians' influences, will be in the best interest of this bank going forward?
For sure. This should be not only free from this state interference, but also the management to be responsible for their own borrowing. Only in extreme cases the government should give guarantee. So then what does it require? Like any normal bank that needs more financing, you need to have a very good management, devoted management, experienced, good management, big knowledge of whatever loan they give, and mostly having in mind that everything what we need from the development bank, unlike commercial bank, we need longer term, 5 years, 10 years projects that is to be viable. That should be commercially viable projects that will invest. And for that, unfortunately, a situation where we have a lot of economic restrictions, like price, for example, controlled by the government, of fuel, electricity, several products, almost 30 plus products. And when the price is controlled by the government, by the resolution, by the bureaucrats, the market information is not true. Like the case now today, the price for gasoline had increased with 200 tugriks. People are not happy because they used to be with the price, that they had estimation or expectation that the price will not be changing.
Yeah.
Price is always changing. And the government wanted not to change it for quite some time. They gave a lot of money to the supplier, and their time is finished. Now Russia increased price, and they want to increase the price. So that's the issue. Issue is how competitive is the economy.
Yeah. Moving on to our final story. We close the show with a look back at the 220 days since the new parliament under the majority control of the Mongolian People's Party took power last July. Parliament's fall session comes to a close on Friday after months of uncertainty regarding the economy and the passage of new laws protecting families from domestic abuse and changes to social welfare. The Universal Children's Allowance has been continued, but now targets certain families that are underprivileged. Also, cash handouts have been granted to the elderly of 65 years and older, and there's been expanded social welfare for traditional herders with maternity payouts and 5 years off the retirement ages. So, do you think, looking at what this government, the legislature as well as the cabinet under Prime Minister Jargotolga Erdogan, is actually delivering on some of the promises or all of the promises it made in the days up to the election?
Well, people were expecting more, in particular certain substantial steps towards making business more competitive, more easy, less taxes. They promised originally good tax discount for smaller companies, which did not happen. And so from the point of whether the economy became competitive, productive, if Mongolian companies become more business-like, the answer is no. So they still, as we have discussed, they have still to go towards more liberalization, towards more freeing the prices, more giving freedom, and going with less tax. And most importantly, I was writing recently an article about that, about this entrepreneurship spirit. Yeah. Have they increased or not? The complaints, people say that no, because it's economic difficulties, etc., etc. And again, the questions of was it good, effective work or not, it depends not on the amount of laws they made. But my concern is Mongolia has a lot of laws, 600 something laws, the most almost required to have a normal market economy running. But the issue is, are they enforced? Are contracts enforced?
And are there a lot of loopholes?
Yes. So there are arbitrations. How much strong the contract enforcement in this country. To this regard, a lot of things to be made. In particular, people are not happy with the way how the whole foreign debt was used.
Yeah.
We found out a lot this Genghis bond, all this money was siphoned, misused, plundered, and who is going after?
Yeah.
And who is taking responsibility? Nobody so far. So the point is, if the basket, right, has a hole, and if the holes are not fixed, whatever money you pour, it doesn't help. That's the situation of Mongolia today. And in particular now, when more and more state-owned companies are still there, they are making more debt, not profit. In that circumstances, still government is to go ahead to privatizing these state-owned companies.
And you mentioned price controls, and this week we just saw kind of a witch hunt looking at
exactly.
all the actual gas companies for raising their prices. And it's kind of ironic because really gas prices have been falling, but the tugrik has been falling faster.
Yes. A good parallel, yes, I agree. And that's why from domestic market, for the domestic market, they sell in tugriks and they buy with the US dollar, and there are two parties really cutting them.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to blame directly those companies, but however, customers now see the increase of price. And the last thing government made was they have deleted or they have taken away excise taxes on the import of the gasoline.
Yeah.
So maybe I think it will be the best if the price is free, and then the excess taxes need to be paid, and the gasoline prices increases. But I think it will be for a short time. It will be increasing. Then it should go down, because if we have a free competition, they need to sell their gas. Still, they need to sell gas and compete with each other by the cost. All these gas suppliers and gas stations.
Yeah. So we're still early in the year. It's February 2017. And I think what it's on a lot of people's minds is what's going to happen next with the economy. 2016 was probably the roughest, if not rougher, since 2009. And I think what they're wondering is now that there's negotiations with the IMF for a bailout, can Mongolians expect hikes in taxes? Can they expect cuts in social welfare? Will there be more pains to look forward to this year?
Yes, we have not hit the bottom line. Still, we have a lot of constructions companies in the big distress now. Following them, all banks will have an issue with the quality of loan. So they need to now increase tax, they cut the social welfare, and it is going to be not easy spring after the Lunar New Year, which is at the end of the month, and I think from the end of March, things will not be that easy. But it is something that we were going to anyway, so hopefully during this recession's bottom line time, the country will be able to fix many wrongdoings, mostly by the government beforehand.
One thing I noticed looking at this legislative agenda, that one really big winner from the laws recently passed has been traditional herders, actually. You know, I mentioned that mothers are now getting maternity pay, the retirement age is cut off, but there's also been a new loan program granted to herders. So
and they go now early 5 years to pension.
Yeah.
And yet they are not enough. They are not paying. Only 10% of herders pay pension fee, and yet all will take a pension. It will increase again the burden for those who is working, because now per 10 person we have 3 person not paying the social taxes, the insurances, and then these people to carry them together. As a result, this medical care is not enough, not good, and now pension fund is not fluid or liquid enough to cover the current cost. And furthermore, we will have more difficulty because more people will be retiring. So Mongolia is going to face very serious, difficult challenges ahead.
I think what's important to notice, though, is there are many herders, and they vote, and this is an election year for the presidency.
That's unfortunately a big concern, because now politicians are dividing the skin of the bear, which is not killed yet. So that's the situation. And until we start spend as much as we earn, until we go to that discipline, and all people's attention goes to productivity, goes to the entrepreneurship, then this country cannot go through all these difficulties.
I'm going to let you have the final word there.
Well, hopefully there are a lot of rational minds and decision makers among the decision makers, and some will listen to us what we say, and there will be certain decisions that will help Mongolian private business to do business better.
We can only hope. Well, that's our program for the evening. We hope our briefings give you a head start as you enter the work week. Good night, all. Good night,
Thank
Drago,
you.
and good night, Ulaanbaatar.
Have a good evening.